This is the Ivy League Hoops Hour, where we cover all things men's basketball in the Ancient Eight. We are your hub, your go-to, your day one. But not really, though. I'm your co-host, Coach Sidney Johnson, former head coach of the Princeton Tigers from 2007 to 2011, and former three-time captain of the Tigers in 95, 96, and 97. My co-host is Princeton alumnus and former Princeton graduate assistant coach Lawrence L. Boogie Schuler. Lawrence, how you making out?
Fantastic, Coach. How about you?
I am doing great. I know we have a very good show. The first time ever we've had a future neurosurgeon on the show as AARYN RAI, stand out forward for the Dartmouth Big Green. He joins us. We also have Jon Solomon to join us on My Eyes Don't Lie to Me, and an appearance from William McCormack from the Yale Daily News as he covers Yale men's basketball. And he brings his insights to how well the Bulldogs are prepared to defend their Ivy League title. We've got a jam-packed show. Let's get it. Welcome, folks, to the Ivy League Hoops Hour, and we're going to jump into our segment of My Eyes Don't Lie to Me, our review of the week that was in the Ancient Eight, as we look at the games, players, coaches, and trends leading up to Ivy Madness. Once again, Lawrence and I are thrilled to welcome Jon Solomon, our chief in-game correspondent, to the discussion, bringing balance to my over-wordy meanderings and Lawrence's distrust of the bureaucratic malaise that plagues the governance of NCAA Division I basketball. Welcome, Jon.
I'm right there at the center of that Venn diagram, I suppose.
Well, you have been an awesome contributor in addition to this discussion. And as per usual, let's jump off with a review of the Princeton Tigers game. Lots to talk about. Have at it.
Indeed, Yale holds on versus Princeton at Jadwin Gym, 80-74. The Tigers were 11-0 at home coming in, undefeated overall in conference play. Here you had the top three-point shooting team in the Ivy League, Princeton, taking on the top three-point shooting defense in the conference, Yale. Princeton ran a design play off the opening tip that's likely familiar to you both, slapping the jump ball forward to Drew Freiberg, who found a cutting Ethan Wright for an immediate dunk. They followed that with Wright leaving the ball to Tosan Evboban for a second slam. Yale, thoroughly unfazed, responded with 11 straight of their own, taking a lead they'd never relinquish. Matthew Cotton curled to the top of the arc twice to put the Bulldogs up 19-6. Both teams going hard in a rough, jagged game, a lot of fouls, turnovers, and charges taken on both sides. For the second time in as many contests, Tosan picked up his second first-half personal, heading out at the 11:42 mark with his team down 10. He'd return 3 minutes later and immediately make an impact with a drive and two more free throws to cap a 10-2 Tiger push and draw within 6. Yale didn't flinch. When Ivy leading scorer Azar Swain coiled for a long two, the lead had extended to 33-19. The Bulldogs grabbed the final 5 points of the half, first beating a series of traps to locate Cotton by the Princeton bench for 3, and then after an isolation drive by Jalen Llewellyn, found Wright for a corner tray that was off the mark. Enough time remained for Yale's Ben Mbeng to beat the clock with a layup that rolled around the rim several times before dropping to send the Bulldogs racing off the floor, up 43-26. Felt like in the opening 20 minutes that for the first time in conference play, senior Jalen Llewellyn was trying to do too much. The Tigers overall were a rough 7 for 14 at the line, 8 for 26 from the floor, and 3 for 15 from deep. Down 17, the start of the second half followed a similar script to many of the Tigers' conference comebacks, buoyed by a barrage of threes. Langborg's free throw jumper was followed by his block of Jalen Gabidon. Tosan scored off a Langborg assist, and when Freiberg sandwiched triples around a bucket for Matt Noling, it was a single-digit deficit. Up 47-41, Mbang showed nice control for a layup, and after a Langborg three was long, Swain drove baseline and dished to Gabadon for a slam. Yale continued to have answers. Isaiah Kelly rattled in a three for a 63-49 score, but Wright responded from distance. Langborg could not finish before August Mahoney used a screen to go left and hit his own tray. Noling squared up inside for a 70-58 score with 3:21 to go, and it looked like the result was secure. But I said to you both last week, I'd believe Princeton would lose an Ivy League game when they finally lost an Ivy League game. Well, the Tigers are Michael Myers, the Undertaker, or Ghostface. Every time you think you've finished them off, they rise silently once more behind you. And only the gasping audience is aware. I guess Yale is Jamie Lee Curtis in this complicated analogy. Well, Llewellyn, who to this point was 3 for 12 from the floor and 1 for 7 from deep with 5 turnovers, shockingly made 4 consecutive threes. Simultaneously, Princeton backcourt pressure was giving Yale significant issues. The first Llewellyn three was answered by Noling inside the arc, the second countered by 2 free throws for Mbang. The third drew the Tigers within 7, and after a Swain jumper was short, Llewellyn hit a fourth time for a 74-70 count. With a Bulldog ahead of the pressure, Kelly's diagonal pass sailed too high, and Princeton retained possession with under 90 seconds to go. Llewellyn's fifth attempt behind the arc and as many possessions came up short, but Wright swooped in for the offensive rebound, laying the ball home in the same motion, 74-72. Swain's turnaround jumper went down over Llewellyn. The ball hanging in the air as a whistle sounded, and Jadwin Jim stood silent. Swain, the top free throw shooter in the conference, missed his attempt, and Princeton called time down 4. The Bulldogs had a foul to give but did not use it, and for the first time all game, Tosan brought the ball up the floor, long striding to the rim for a layup plus a Kelly foul. Tosan missed his chance at the line, part of a 1 for 4 showing from the stripe in the second half for the Tigers. As an aside, Tosan has been great this year, quite possibly the player of the year to this point, but he's just over 53% at the line and now making fewer than half his free throws in Ivy play. Where was I? It wasn't over. Facing pressure from Tosan in the backcourt, Swain dribbled the ball off his foot, and Princeton had possession down 2 with the shot clock off. The Tigers called Tosan's number to tie, but Kelly challenged well inside, and Mbang made both ends of his 1-and-1 to extend the Yale lead to 2 possessions. Llewellyn was unable to score, and 2 free throws from Kelly kept the Tigers down for good, giving the Bulldogs their 7th straight versus Princeton. I think there are significant repercussions from this result. Yale did this with Princeton at full strength, and Swain shooting 6 for 16, including 0 for 3 from deep. But I would imagine the way the final 4 minutes played out is going to stay in the minds of both squads before they meet again. Now that they've been bested, everyone else in the Ivy League knows it is actually possible to top Princeton, starting with Cornell on Friday, who I should add is undefeated in Ithaca.
John, how much of what Princeton has been doing in terms of falling behind at home is in their ability to come back, albeit not against Yale, is that what I've coined like championship DNA and calm under pressure? Or is it on the other side where there's not quite the sense of urgency to grab this thing and make sure that they distance themselves? Like I'm just trying to, because now you run up against a really good Yale team and you can't make that comeback that you've been expecting and been able to do earlier in the season.
Well, here's something I noticed that I didn't realize until today. According to Pomeroy, Princeton is 297th in the nation defensively.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And second to last in the Ivy League. And the only Ivy school in the top 200, both offensively and defensively, is Yale. And so for a team like Yale, where if they're having difficulty offensively, their defense is going to carry them, Princeton can turn it on offensively. I mean, they're 59th offensively in the nation, according to these same rankings. And when they get going, they're ridiculously efficient. But when that isn't happening, their defense isn't necessarily there to carry them similarly. Does that answer your question? I feel like it was
does.
sort of tangentially there, but not completely.
No. Yeah, I think you nailed it. And I mean, and with those numbers defensively, they're like in the bottom third in the country, which doesn't bode well. And one thing I mentioned last week is they also, going to the offensive side of the ball, they don't get to the free throw line. So it's layups and great shots and great threes. They make shots. That's their mantra. Princeton basketball makes shots. But if that fades or wanes a bit, they don't get to the free throw line either. And so, low free throw line numbers or attempts and not strong defense, there could be a little bit of an opening there for Ivy League opponents. And, with Cornell and Brown playing them well at Jadwin Gym, they have to be at least confident going into those games at home. I still think Princeton's better, and we'll talk about that later. But it was an eye-opening effort by the Bulldogs. I want to pose this to you too, John. Mason Hooks is a kid who really caught my eye, early in the season, 8 points, 3 rebounds against Minnesota. And he was really difficult for the Golden Gophers to deal with. He had 8 and 6 versus Monmouth. A loss for the Tigers, but a really competitive game. And Monmouth is a very good team. 8 and 4, 8 points, 4 rebounds against Bucknell. He's a freshman, and I know he's a backup. But as Tosan gets into foul trouble, I thought that Mason Hooks would be somebody to be relied on. And he's played very few minutes in conference play. And I just wonder if there's anything you've seen from him that doesn't allow him to be more effective or more relied on in Ancient 8 play.
He had one sensational defensive moment in the first half once Tosan came out, where he was guarding Swain on the perimeter and he just kept pushing at Swain, and there was like a force field around him where Swain kept bouncing back further and further towards half court and eventually turned the ball over. And everyone on the Princeton bench got so fired up, and it seemed like, I believe that was around when the lead had dwindled again to single digits, and it really felt like, okay, this is what's going to drive the defense, effort plays like that. But yeah, I mean, when he comes in, he has nice moves in the paint. He has those, little shimmies for hooks. And but when your most important player is on the floor for 30 plus minutes a game, those opportunities are few and far between, even with foul trouble.
Yeah, I just think with the perimeter guys, and there's some, Alako comes in and starts to contribute, and Elijah Barnes is a kid, a little bit more of a front court player, but playing, not necessarily the 4 position, but he's given them some good minutes. And you have, Wright and Langborn and Llewellyn and that whole crew and Freiberg. I just thought there might be some room for a productive backup 5-man for Tosan that gives them a 2-headed monster, albeit that Tosan will play 30 plus minutes. But if Hooks is productive, and then you think about those defensive numbers, he's got a great presence. Not only is he a rim protector, but I saw that earlier in the year as well. He was switching out on Big Ten guards, SEC guards, and sliding his feet such that it wasn't a complete blow by. So just something I'm throwing out there is I think the Tigers have a full and complete roster, and are certainly going to need to lean on it when they hit the road and try to keep themselves. I mean, obviously they're in the title race, but they want to win this thing. And so they've got to get some wins.
Let me add 2 things, and then I'm happy to move on to other games. I think as Ivy play has gone, the available bench minutes have narrowed, where Princeton's really only going 7-8 deep at this point. And then secondly, per what you were saying about free throws, not only are the Tigers only averaging 8.7 free throws per game, but when they're getting to the line, they're making under 66% of their chances. So they're not getting to the line, and when they are, great things aren't happening.
It's going to be interesting. Yale certainly sent a message. Are you looking for some college basketball content to add to your listen of the Ivy League Hoops Hour? Well, Lawrence and I have one for you. If you love college basketball, then listen to the 3-Bid League podcast, the original Atlantic 10 men's basketball podcast. Tyler Cronin and Matt Graber. They'll guide you through college basketball's most chaotic league with a weekly collection of fantastic guests across the 14 teams and the hoops world. They dive into each week's biggest games, the most entertaining storylines, and the hottest takes in the A10, along with the ever-important quest for at-large bids and bid thieves. Listen to the 3-Bid League podcast on Apple, Spotify, or any podcast platform. Well, let's jump into Penn at Harvard, one that I felt pretty good about. I never doubted this one for a minute. Now, I didn't expect Penn's Dingle to have his second 31-point outing, but I did expect the Quakers to put more pressure on the paint than Harvard did, and Harvard has not been able to do that all year for the most part. And in so doing, the Quakers were just really productive on the offensive end. 17 made free throws, only 10 turnovers, 47% shooting for the game. And the Quakers go at Harvard and win by 4. It has to be mentioned that Harvard's Tommy Amaker, he's been missing so many players. Josh Hemmings, Justice Jogbor all season. Forbes has just come back, last few games and still seems to be getting his legs under him. And now they're missing Chris Ledlum, 4th best scorer in the league and top rebounder, and Tretow, who's averaging 8.5 points. So Ledlum and Tretow didn't play against Penn. Harvard's health issues continue to plague them, and they're in real danger, guys, of not qualifying for the Ivy Madness tournament of which they are hosting. Penn gets a really good win, their first win on the road in Ancient 8 play, and the Crimson are reeling. Let's pivot to Dartmouth at Columbia. Key for me was how much Dartmouth was able to score off of Columbia's turnovers and the efficiency of the Dartmouth offense, which is the Princeton offense. But honestly, the Big Green were very effective in the half court. They didn't turn the ball over themselves. 7 turnovers for the game. This week's guest, AARYN RAI, paced Dartmouth with 20 points. And a disturbing trend for Columbia, guys, is emerging. They're good enough to establish a lead, especially as I've watched their home games closely. And they were leading in this game for almost the entire first half. But when they concede a lead, guys, they never seem, unlike some of the other Ivy matchups that we've seen where it's back and forth, Columbia never seems able to stay in the fight to get it close again. So it's been tough sledding for the Lions right now. And Dartmouth gets a key and important win on the road. And rounding out our review on My Eyes Don't Lie to Me, the game of the week, a stunning victory for Cornell on the road against Brown. And boy, was this something to watch. Cornell made 4 threes for the game, and they actually committed 19 turnovers. But the Brown Bears, amazingly, guys, an outstanding defensive front court with Gainey and Show. They actually gave up 38 points in the paint to Cornell. Cornell, the Big Red, they gave up 38 points to them. I mean, this is a fast-breaking team. Obviously, they're looking to get quick layups and threes, but they're not necessarily bullying you at the rim. And the Bears conceded 38 points in the paint. Tamanang Cho really struggled. I guess I put the whammy on him. He really struggled in the first half. He had turnovers, multiple missed layups, and then he also got in foul trouble, guys. So Cornell wrote an 18-point lead, and then this amazing finish at the end of the game. Brown suffers a stunning and disappointing loss versus Cornell, and they chased the game, the entire game. They're doing their best Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde impression. So take this in. During non-conference play, the Bears had a 4-game winning streak, and I'm singing their praises as I still am holding on belief in this amazing roster and the coaching of Mike Martin. But they followed that 4-game win streak with a 4-game losing streak. Now in conference play, Brown gets a decisive road win at Harvard, and then they follow that with a 3-game losing streak in league play. They get a 19-point win last week at Columbia, and then a home loss against Cornell where they weren't in the game until basically the last 8 minutes of the game. I think stunning result and disappointing, I would say, for the Bears. certainly that number 4 seed seems to be slipping away.
Cornell did just enough to stay in front, and then even though they were able to tie the game, at the very end, Cornell gets an out-of-bounds under with 3 seconds left. Kobe Dixon misses the first, gets his own rebound, and puts it back in. And then with 0.1 seconds left, the game is over. I think when Marin fouled out, it took a lot of the air out of the balloon. He was pretty active in their press, and then in transition, he made some great drives and some great passes to chip away and get them back into it. But once he fouled out, I don't think his replacement quite filled his shoes.
Yeah, good call. I mean, he's been hot or cold, mostly hot, and he does bring something to their attack that is hard to replace. Cho having one of his lesser efforts in a must-win game. Foul trouble is one thing, but also missed layups, missed free throws. That really hurt him. Not being critical, just observing. And Cornell seems to have, kind of gotten their second win. I was a bit worried about how they performed against Yale, and it seems to kind of given them a little bit of a wake-up call, and they've responded with some good wins since that outing.
Lawrence talked about doing just enough. Keller Boothby scores with 13:53 left in the second half, and Cornell's up 18. They don't get another field goal until 1/10 of a second left. They got 18 points at the line during that stretch, and that was enough. Fantastic screen, by the way, to get Dixon some space, and then just an incredible left-handed claw to snatch that inbounds pass to even put himself in a position to win the game. I think there are other players where that might have careened off their hand and headed towards the visiting bench instead.
Yeah, you nailed it. Our special guest on this week's pod currently serves as a staff reporter for the Yale Daily News. His current beat has him covering all things Yale men's basketball, but has previously served as a sports and digital editor for the Yale Daily News and written numerous articles on Yale's athletic administration. Originally from Boston, Massachusetts, he is finishing his final semester of studies at the Nutmeg State's lone Ivy League institution. We have none other than William McCormack from the Yale Daily News. William, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, this should be terrific. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Lawrence L. Boogie Schuler. William and I actually bumped into each other, Lawrence. I think I mentioned this to you at a Yale game against Cornell a few weeks ago, and we'll reference that. But we're trying to pull our listeners. William mentioned that he listened to the pod, and I was really honored to hear that, William, and said, hey, you know what, let's get you on and let's talk Yale Bulldogs basketball and the Ivy League in general. And I think a perfect place to start, William, is this recent game against Yale, a tremendous performance at Jadwin Gym. And I just would like to ask from your vantage point, you've been covering the team all year, how did they make this happen? And I have to say, especially Yale, following what I have to think was a disappointing loss to the Penn Quakers last week. Did you see this coming, William, building a 17-point lead at Jadwin Gym? And how did James Jones and the team do it?
Right. I think it was a totally different first half than the first half Yale played at Penn a weekend earlier. At Penn, I think Coach Jones told me after the game the offense seemed a little off balance. There were a few plays actually where the team didn't run them properly, and Yale, scored, I think, only 22 points in the first half, was down 13. At Princeton, that 13-0 run really early in the game, I think, set up a lead that Yale then never lost. And what I keep coming back to in that Princeton game, and I think in a lot of Yale's Ivy League games, has just been the really strong play of Bez Mbang and Matt Nolan. They're Yale's two rookie starters who both didn't make their first career start until Yale's final non-conference game on the road at St. Mary's. But both have played really big roles so far during Ivy League play. Saturday, Matt Nolan with 33 minutes, team high 17 points. Bezembang, the first year, the point guard, had actually a double-double with 10 rebounds and 10 points.
Those contributions have not necessarily come out of nowhere because Jones and his staff have always recruited well, but they were kind of working them slowly into the lineup. And you're right, they've been an added boost, I guess, to the troops and the rotation. But you look at Princeton and how well they've shot three-pointers all season and how well they just distribute the basketball. And so that 17-point lead also had to do not only with that added punch of some young guys in the Yale lineup, but defensively. I mean, they were guarding the three-point line and bothering the Tigers so well. And I just wonder, has there been a heightened defensive focus there as well? I mean, what have you seen from this group as they've gotten into Ivy play?
What I heard from Coach Jones after the game, and Matthew Cotton on Saturday reiterated this, was just focusing on contesting shots. Yale's three-point defense has been really strong during Ivy League play, and I think Princeton entered the game tied fifth in the country, making 10.7 threes a game, but only had 3 in the first half. And I thought that Yale's sort of perimeter defense was really strong. Jalen Llewellyn, obviously, at the end with sort of an incredible 4-possession stretch of shot after shot after shot, and that made it a game in the final minutes. But defense is always a priority for Yale. I've covered, this is actually my 3rd season covering the Yale men's basketball beat. I did it as a first year and a sophomore as well before, the Ivy League took the year off last year. And very early on, I learned, and I'm sure you both know this too, that James Jones has 3 sort of coaching pillars when it comes to his basketball philosophy: defend, rebound, and share the ball. And so defense is always a Yale priority.
Yeah, excellent. You're spot on with that. Let's pivot a little bit, and I certainly want to leave room for Lawrence to chime in, but I want to go there specifically with one of the players you mentioned, Matt Noling, and I'm very familiar with him because he's coming out of the East Catholic program here in the state of Connecticut. Watched him. That's a school in the Hartford area and a very good program. And so I watched him as a high schooler, and now I'm seeing him blossom as a Yale Bulldog. 3 of his 4 double-figure games on the season are in league play. As you mentioned, he's been certainly worked into the lineup. He was the best player on the floor in that game that you and I watched when Yale smashed Cornell. I mean, actually just took them apart. And then he leads a team in scoring, 17 points on the road at Jadwin Gym, a tough place to play, arguably the number 1 team in the league. So here's my question, William. Keno Lilly Jr. from Brown or Matt Noling from Yale as Ivy League Rookie of the Year? How impressed have you been by those two, and how would you compare them in terms of their impact on their 2 teams?
Interesting. I mean, they play really different roles too. I think, Keno Lilly, I've noticed, has just started to, instead of just coming off the bench and playing a lot of minutes off the bench, he started to start just because he can score so well. I think, I'll preface this by saying that I usually try to avoid, as much as I love listening to people talk about predictions and projected outcomes, as a beat reporter, I always try to avoid that just because, I feel like my role is to sort of document and add color to the game and people's stories off the court as well. And so I don't have a ton of experience making good predictions, so this could turn out wrong. I think Noling, though, at least when you look at their contributions to a team, not necessarily points per game, but contributions to a team, Matt Noling has filled a really big need for Yale, in that Yale sort of entered this season and much of the non-conference slate were a team that was perimeter-oriented. Jalen Gabadon, Yale's captain, was actually starting at the 4 for most of the non-conference, even though his natural position is more in the 3 on the wing.
Right.
And Noling sort of really stepped up to be a post presence for Yale. And Coach Jones has mentioned this. EJ Jarvis, Yale's forward in the class of 2023, was injured for a lot of the non-conference, and he's helped fill that role too. But Noling can really score at the basket for Yale. He was 8 for 9 on Saturday at Princeton, and Coach Jones and sort of the Yale team have emphasized that he's really tough to guard down there, even though he isn't that tall. I think he's maybe 6'6", playing the 4. He's really tough to defend around the rim.
I couldn't agree with you more. And one thing, there is the defense, there is rebounding, there's sharing the ball, but Yale has always, when they're at their best, they've played inside out and played through their forwards and posted and pretty much bullied you at the rim, to score, to get to the line, to get your better players in foul trouble. And so that really jumped out at me. Again, going back to Yale versus Cornell, how much Nolan posted, how much they looked for him, and he had his way with the Cornell defenders. And then they go right back to that against Princeton. And I couldn't agree with you more that there's something there where he brings them an inside presence. And I would say, yeah, it's not in the form of a Paul Atkinson, but he's a small forward who goes to work in the interior, but against perimeter guys, and really put a ton of pressure on Princeton, Cornell. And it seems like they're going to ride that out for the rest of the season in a way that James Jones is used to playing. So he's been really effective. I tend to lean on Lilly Jr. just because he's been good all season long. But those are two first-year guys who are playing outstanding basketball. And it's just always fun to see new guys on the scene. Let me ask you another opinion. And the one thing I would encourage you, William, is my predictions have been wildly incorrect all season long. So don't worry about not getting any of these right. It never holds me back from trying to share what I'm thinking. So I'll ask you this. I've seen Tosan Awoma all season long and felt like he's been super impressive, have been hailing him as Ivy League Player of the Year. Where does Azar Swain fit in that Player of the Year discussion? Because he's been absolutely outstanding. As Yale has kind of been slow to find their form from start to finish, now they're really heating up. He's been good all year long. Where would you see him fitting in terms of the Player of the Year discussion?
That's a good question. I think in terms of the discussion, I think he's got to be right at the center of it, along with Awoma, along with Jordan Dingle, probably. Azar has been phenomenal all year, like you've mentioned, but I was sort of reflecting recently, and he's been phenomenal since I've been covering this beat. The first game I reported on was Yale's Pac-12 China game. They were in Shanghai playing California. This was November 2018. And Azar was the player of the game that game. He came off the bench. I think he had 16 points. And so since I've been on this beat, Azar has always had a presence. And 2 years ago, and then especially this year, he has become, Yale's best player, Yale's go-to scorer. And it's hard for me to say, that he wouldn't be at the center of the discussion just when you see him on Tuesday night last week hit 24 points in the first half, 37 during the full game. I think he initially carved out a niche at Yale because he was such a good spot-up shooter, a perimeter shooter. Mm-hmm. And, has developed so many other parts of his game to that he can score anywhere on the court, mid-range jumpers. He drives to the hoop. And I think I was really excited to see the Jordan Dingle, Azar Swain matchup in Philadelphia 2 weekends ago.
Yeah.
And Dingle might have taken that one. I think I read just a few days ago that he was the first Penn player to post 2 consecutive 30-point games in Ivy League history, which is an incredible stat on its own. But watching Azar score is just really fun, and he's been a huge help to this Yale team.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think really fun for Yale fans and terrifying, honestly, for his opposition. I think that the coaches are befuddled in terms of how to deal with him. And one of the things that's tricky about him, William, is his pace is so tough to handle. If you get all jazzed up as a defender and you want to load up and guard him hard, the thing with him is he kind of lulls you to sleep in terms of his pace. When he dribbles the basketball, he's not going like a bat out of hell. And so then if you overreact to him, that's kind of when you make the mistake. So it's a hard thing to handle. And then he can make these in-between shots. He's got the floaters and then obviously the deep range in case you're slow on your closeouts. And he's gutsy, isn't he? I mean, he's made so many big shots for Yale that you've had to have fun watching him. Now, you had this experience with the team. You're so close to the program and Ivy League basketball in general. What's your view? Lawrence and I get on here and a little bit of our soapbox, but an opportunity to revel in something that we love to talk about. I'd love to hear from your standpoint. What is your view on Ivy Madness as the decider of the automatic berth in the Ancient Eight? Do you like the newness of this? Are you more of a traditionalist and wish we were going off of the 14-game schedule? Where do you sit on it, William?
Yeah, I'll say I'm in some ways a little, compared to your experience and your years watching the league, I'm a little new to Ivy League basketball in the grand scheme of things. This is my third season sort of very closely following the league. just because I didn't, think much about reporting on Yale or the Ivy League before becoming a student here. And so I've only known a world where there was Ivy Madness in a 4-team tournament. And I like it. I personally like it. I think it means that every game, especially, during those last 2 weekends, still really packs a lot of meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And just those 2 days were, I'm thinking back to March 2019. I was a first year. Yale was hosting the tournament that year at John Jay Lee Amphitheater. And just an incredible 2 days for the league. Right. Great basketball, a really excited fan base. Usually you go to a game at John Jay Lee Amphitheater, and in the before COVID times, for Harvard, for Penn, for Princeton, for some other Ivy League games, there'd be a crowd that will show up, more than 2,000. Harvard will be sold out. But walking into the gym that weekend during Ivy Madness in March 2019 was a totally different experience. I had someone come up to me sort of hawking tickets outside the gym, and it's just stuff you don't see with Ivy League basketball usually.
Yeah.
And there's a national following, and I thought it was a great weekend. And I'm really looking forward to mid-March at Levites in just about six weeks.
And so to put you on the spot, let's continue that theme. The winner of the 2020-22 Ivy Madness Conference Tournament will be, and why, William?
I think everyone will think I'm biased. I'm pulling up the preseason poll that I sent into the Ivy League this year for the media poll. Mm-hmm. And I had Yale at number 1, Princeton 2, Brown 3. And, I think Brown lost a really tough game Sunday versus Cornell. But I think I feel really good about my top 2 picks, Yale 1 and Princeton 2. I see them meeting in the Ivy Madness Championship, and I see Yale making another trip to the NCAA tournament.
Wow, cool. Can you help me figure out, I've been touting Brown, and, obviously I'm a friend of Brian Earl and super excited, frankly, every time he wins a basketball game. He's an outstanding person, very good coach. So they got a huge win against Brown. But I think they're good, and help me figure out, it's comforting in some respects to hear that you rated them pretty high. I just can't see how they can't kind of string a few wins in a row together to really establish themselves as a safe bet for the top 4. What do you see there in the Brown Bears?
I think they're so good. I think that Yale win on the road at Brown on Martin Luther King Day might go down as one of Yale's sort of biggest wins of the conference season, along with Saturday at Princeton, just because I think Brown, has potentially the most talented big man in the league with Jalen Gainey. Tom Cho is definitely in the Ivy League Player of the Year discussion as well. Mm-hmm. And it's just a fantastic defensive team. I think that, scoring has been more of an issue for them than some other Ivy League teams, and sort of slow starts like yesterday, versus Cornell may be what hurts them. They're in a hole right now trying to make Ivy Madness, but I've always thought Brown has been a fantastic team. I'll say I'm good friends with David Mitchell, who is the Brown captain and a fantastic defender. We went to high school together.
Okay.
And I actually went to school with him since 7th grade.
Wow.
At Belmont Hill, right outside of Boston. And so, I'm sort of secretly, I spend my time following Yale, writing about Yale, but am always secretly pulling for the Bears and was really hoping, and I'm still hoping that they can make their first Ivy Madness appearance in March.
How cool would that be for you to be able to cover the team that obviously you're so close to, but also have Brown in that top 4 and in that tournament setting as well? It would offer the viewing audience and folks who care so much about the league a great opportunity to see Yale, to see Princeton, to see Brown. And then who else would that be? Might it be Penn? Harvard has been very interesting. I wonder, and I'm wondering out loud, and certainly open this up for you to weigh in on, but I think Harvard's not quite as good as they've been in the years past, and how interesting it'll be to host a tournament and the host school not be participating. What would that look like?
It would be surprising. Who would have expected that at the start of the year? I'm not sure if you've ever come across Luke Benz. He is a 2019 Yale grad. He's now a PhD student at Harvard in the biostatistics department. Mm-hmm. And he's also a fantastic Ivy Hoops analyst. And so yes. we exchange texts, and I pretty closely follow his playoff odds and a lot of the work he does in R around, Ivy League basketball analytics. He has Harvard at 30% to make the playoffs right now. So they're on the out looking in. I think even though, we'd maybe both love to see Brown make their first Ivy Madness, I think Cornell right now after Sunday's win is in a much better spot. And Penn, definitely. I think Penn, I'd be really surprised if they don't make it at this point. They played the toughest non-conference schedule in the league. And I think a lot of people wrote them off coming into conference play, but have sort of built up a strong start right now that I think they can at least continue at a similar pace or slightly below for the rest of the conference season.
I couldn't agree with you more. I feel like Penn has been the story of the league so far, and I don't know if I certainly didn't think that they were going to do what they're doing now. I never thought they would be a bottom team in terms of the reflection of their non-conference schedule because I knew it was so challenging. But to see them playing so well has been really impressive. We'll see if their road form holds, but they have certainly shown themselves to have a great start. Cornell's looking good. I think there's so much quality there in terms of Brown. I agree with you that I think, there's too much. There are too many good players and they're tough. I mean, they're just tough defensively. So I think they'll be in the mix. And then obviously Yale and Princeton, it speaks for themselves. So it's going to be an interesting ride. And William, we're just thrilled on our show for you to join us in this discussion on this journey. I love the fact that you put in a plug for Luke Bentz. I've seen his stuff online often, and he does a wonderful job. And just as you were talking, I gave him a little follow on his Twitter because he's certainly someone that we might pull into this discussion. We want to have everybody who listens to a pod weigh in, enjoy this ride. We all have our teams that we're rooting for, but at the end of the day, it's a wonderful brand of basketball that we want to bring, shine some light to. And William, you've helped us do that in a terrific way this morning. So appreciate you joining us. Before we let you go, I want to pause and see if my co-host, Lawrence, you have anything to pose to our guest.
One of the things I love about this pod is I learn something new with every episode. And William McCormack, undefeated, is one of the best things I've learned since we've started. I think that it adds another layer to the cake. Is William going to go 3-0 for his career? Just take a second to look back. Can you tell us a little bit about your own experience at the NCAA tournament? What was that like?
It was a lot of fun. It was Yale played in Jacksonville that March, and my former co-beat reporter, Chris Zillow, he's a medical student now at Stony Brook, and was my sports editor too, a great friend. We were excited that it was in Jacksonville because it was so cold in New Haven, and we were trying to get out in the sun a little bit. And what you end up doing, which I didn't expect, is you sort of spend the entire day in the arena, along these concrete hallways, and then you obviously go out and there's great basketball. But it was, the sort of perfect capstone experience to that year covering the beat. College basketball is so interesting as a sport to me, just because you have teams across the country, 358, who play an entire season, usually, 30 games, and they all have this eye on 64 spots. And so to be at one of those first round sites where sort of all the attention was concentrated was really exciting. And just to see, as a first year too, I think I've gotten a little more used to, seeing other power conference coaches in press conferences over the last 3 years. It's still unique and special, but I think that first year at March Madness, just being at the same site as Kentucky and seeing sort of the whole production of it was really cool, and was also why my sophomore year, March 2020, why that was sort of, painful, obviously painful for everyone affected by COVID and the lockdown, but just to have the season end at sort of just the wrong time when the best part that you had been building towards for 3 or 4 months was around the corner was sad. And I think was one of the reasons that, after the year off last year, I sort of reflected a little bit after ending my term as sports editor and digital editor at the YDN, and just thought, how am I not going to do this? I got to go back and report another season.
William, as you know, each and every guest that we have on the show, thrilled to have you on and want to get your perspective in terms of looking forward. We'll always ask our guests, there's something on their campus with their basketball program in particular, but academically in the Ivy League, across the 8 schools, could come to fruition and bring a positive change to the Ancient 8. Anything that comes to mind?
I think just something I'm looking forward to on Yale's campus, at least, which will be a positive change for most Yale students, is February 7th, which is the day we can go back to in-person class as of now.
Yeah.
And so that's a week away. We can go and eat in the dining halls starting lunch on Monday. And so looking forward to both of those things. We sort of, Yale pushed back the start of the semester by a week and then made the first 2 weeks online class because of the Omicron variant. But I think I've been encouraged by, how you see it in college basketball with a number of canceled and postponed games really declining. And you see it in the case numbers too. But I'm really excited to get back to in-person class, being a sort of normal student again last fall, and being able to go to in-person classes and be on a full campus and eat in the dining halls and go to basketball games was really refreshing last year after, I think a big chunk of college being totally disrupted by the pandemic. And so I'm excited for February 7th. And I think most Yale students are too.
This may be the most old man question that I've ever posed in my life, but bear with me. For a generation that may be in some ways viewed as so attached to their phones and technology and all that, share with me and share with our audience your pining and your appreciation for interacting with your fellow students in person and just what that means to you, why that's so fundamental.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think, it still means that I might be in class taking notes on my laptop or working on my paper or doing research on my computer. So it's not like it's a world that's totally separate from the screens. They're always there. But just being able to sort of have spontaneous interactions with people on the sidewalk, to have a sense of routine, to have sort of a mini commute that separates your home life from your work life, I think is really healthy. Yeah, it's fun to see people, to meet people. And everything you do, I think, feels a little more engaging and exciting when you're working or learning in person.
Very well said, William. And that balance is, in terms of what you're looking for in your life, you certainly brought that to this conversation, as we certainly want to make sure that all of the Ivy League institutions are well represented. The basketball programs are tremendous. I've been singing the praises of Princeton all year, but look out. Yale is coming. They're playing very well. You've got a front row seat to it, and I hope that you'll carve out some time maybe down the road to join us again.
I'd love to. Thank you both for having me.
Fantastic, William. Appreciate your time. We'll look forward to you joining us in the show in future editions, and thank you for joining us on the Ivy League Hoops Hour.
Thanks again. Hope you guys have a great day, and looking forward to another slate of games this weekend.
Our next guest on the Ivy League Hoops Hour is putting the finishing touches on a memorable student-athlete experience at Dartmouth College. To date, he has tallied over 800 points and grabbed over 500 rebounds, with averages this season among the Ancient Eight top 20, listen to this, folks, in scoring, field goal percentage, rebounding, assists, blocks, and steals. That's a whole lot of production from one player. His recent work includes double-figure scoring in 4 of Dartmouth's last 6 games, with a 20-point, 3 steals, and 1 turnover performance that highlighted a 13-point road win for the Big Green over Columbia last Saturday. If we haven't sparked your interest enough, I'll add that our guest hails from Ontario, Canada, and hopes to pursue a career in neurosurgery. Let's welcome Dartmouth Big Green standout forward, AARYN RAI. AARYN, thanks for joining us on the show.
Oh, thanks for the intro. That was far too generous, but no, pleasure to be here.
All truthful, my man. And I'm going to swing it over. As always, we're joined by my co-host, Lawrence L. Boogie Schuler. Lawrence, take it away.
With Team Canada leading the CONCACAF standings by 4 points over the United States and Mexico. Are you gloating now about the World Cup qualifying, or are you going to wait until the final in Qatar?
I think we still have like 2 or 3 games left to lock it in. But yeah, I watched, I think it was on Sunday or Saturday night. And yeah, played really well at home, missing our best player, Alphonso Davies. He was, I think he was hurt, back spasms or something with the heart. But yeah, no, really thought they played well and kind of like took that home crowd as like an inspiration. Got a 2-0 win, which was huge. And I think that the development throughout the years from when I used to play and now, like in terms of like the systems in Canada in place for soccer players. It's just taken a tremendous leap, and that's why you see success at the national level.
In terms of Premier League, I'm a huge fan. We actually have a segment on the show named "My Eyes Don't Lie to Me," coined after the common phrase that Roy Keane uses in his commentary on the Premier League on Sky Sports, Aaron. So I'm a huge fan, and I'm wondering which is your team that you root for in the Premier League?
Well, both my parents were born in England, and my mom lived most of her life in London. So I'm an Arsenal fan. It's good to see us playing a lot better this year compared to a couple of years prior. But I think we have a lot of young talent, and hyped to see them chase that top 4 finish down the stretch.
That's awesome. They've won a lot of games over the years, and you're right. Mikel Arteta is kind of blending this mix of young stars, and they've got a shot. Do you get really hyped up for the derbies, whether it's Chelsea or Tottenham, or there's a lot of clubs in London, and so those are heated matchups, right?
Yeah, for sure. No, it's always good. It's just the only drawback is sometimes I'm up a little early on the weekend, but yeah. And obviously with back-to-backs and stuff like that, I don't really catch most games anymore. But no, yeah, it's super refreshing, kind of as a change of pace outside of basketball.
Sure. Well, with basketball, I mean, you're originally from Canada, and so with that passion for basketball now in Canada, that seems to be rivaling the hockey stars that come out of Canada so much. What is it about basketball in Canada that has had it grow so much so quickly? And there's a real pride there in terms of Canadian basketball. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think like twofold. One, just kind of like an ease of access, like especially around the major cities when there's like a lot of families who maybe aren't super well off, or just like a lot of immigrants. As Toronto is kind of like a melting pot, that like it's just a way for like everybody to kind of like connect through a sport, and it's also not hard to play as like some other sports like hockey or football, just because you just need a ball and a rim, and it's believe it or not, it's pretty nice outside most months in the year. And then the Raptors also playing really well, and just them succeeding kind of highlight the sport even more. And I think both those factors kind of combine, so you see a rise in basketball in Toronto and the surrounding areas.
I was wondering if you were going to bring up the Raptors, like a true Canadian basketball fan. And so Kawhi Leonard, is he considered one of the all-time Raptors? How does he measure up to Kyle Lowry, who's played so many years there, Vince Carter? Where does Kawhi Leonard rank among the all-time great Toronto Raptors?
I mean, I'm not sure if that's for me to say, but I'm definitely super appreciative of his time, because obviously he brought back a championship to Toronto. But I think in general, like the city probably regards the time spent and kind of like growing the franchise from those like kind of yucky years in the early 2010s where we were like fighting for like 7-8 spots, and then now we were making the conference semifinals consistently or until we traded for Kawhi. So I think the respect for Kawhi is definitely there in the city, but definitely the GOATs of the Raptors franchise are probably, in my opinion at least, Kyle Lowry and DeMar. Awesome.
Well, that's why we have you on the show, man. I want to hear from you. Tell me about Orangeville Prep. It's a program that I'm very familiar with in terms of recruiting over the years, and they've been known to produce a slew of Division I talent for the NCAA, I'm sure in the college ranks in Canada and beyond in terms of the highest levels of play. How many years were you at Orangeville Prep, and what did your development look like at Orangeville Prep? Why is that such a special place in terms of developing quality basketball players?
Yeah, I was there for 2 years, and I came in not really super experienced. I've only before that was playing basketball for 3-4 years, and just a hyper competitive environment. My first year there, I didn't get much playing time. I was behind a bunch of great basketball players, high major talent and some NBA talent. So just competing against guys like that every day just naturally makes you better, and then put me in a position to contribute my second year there. And I think the biggest testament to the talent they produce is just obviously the amount of D1 guys, but just across the board, how much better they make their guys. And I definitely wasn't anywhere near the player I was before I got there. And the coaching staff was great, but I also think that the biggest part of my development was just like the constant competition against great talent, like not just in games outside of the team, but like practices every day. Every day you wake up and you gotta fight because the dude beside you is just as good and probably more talented. So it definitely makes you real competitive, and it really helps development on the court.
Aaron, did you always have your eye towards playing NCAA basketball? For our listeners who aren't aware, the college basketball scene in Canada is very, very good, extremely good, winning programs, excellent coaching. And so I don't know if it, top to bottom rivals the NCAA, but you can play college basketball in Canada and have an outstanding experience. So where did it, or when I should say, did you kind of have your gaze in terms of NCAA basketball in the States?
Yeah, for sure. As mentioned, like for those who don't know, like college basketball in Canada, it's a really high level, and definitely some of the top teams are just as good, if not better than a lot of college teams across the U.S. But yeah, it was just kind of a mix of seeing where my recruitment would take me. I was talking to definitely a couple schools in Canada and then a couple schools in the U.S. and just kind of seeing where the best fit would be in terms of academics and athletics, and then just overall fit. I didn't really throughout the whole process think I was going to end up probably down in the U.S. Usually those offers and recruitments are a little harder to come by. But yeah, just fortunately lucked out and had a couple schools interested, so I was able to come to Dartmouth. But yeah, it wasn't always on my radar, and I was definitely heavily considering playing college basketball in Canada.
Why Dartmouth? Walk us through your recruiting story. What ultimately tipped the scales to choose Hanover, New Hampshire, and playing in the Ivy League?
Pretty funny story, but I wasn't really on their radar per se. Coming out of high school, I didn't play much my junior year, so I went to a couple elite camps across the Ivy League, and also just kind of went to Dartmouth League camp just on my own. Just kind of put myself out there, and I guess they liked what they saw, and I was in contact with Coach Quinn a bunch, who's now at BU, and kind of talking me through what Dartmouth had to offer, and went on a visit. And actually on my visit, funny story, I was playing pickup, and I got my one of my teeth on the right side, not the front, but towards the side, knocked out off off an elbow because I was a low man, and the guy who was rolling caught it, just turned and knocked it right out. So that was interesting. But so I spent the other half of my visit on pain meds. But I really thought the way the team kind of took care of me, and still obviously paid that same amount of attention and care, and kind of felt like a family atmosphere, and the coaches really were interested in my well-being, not just obviously because my teeth got knocked out, but just in general. And they really made me and my parents feel like this would be a good place for 4 years. And I think that whole atmosphere kind of locked me in. And yeah, I was, super grateful for the opportunity, and I didn't think I was going to get many of them. And I thought that might as well capitalize on a great opportunity as is. So I ended up committing before we started playing basketball my senior year.
You won the Rudy LaRusso Award, awarded to Dartmouth's most improved player on the men's basketball team, and that was during the season of 2019-20. You averaged a team-leading 6.4 rebounds. You were the team's second leading scorer. And just considering your roots, Aaron, and the support of your family, and coming to another country, and I can imagine the youth coaches that you've had along the way. So thinking of all of that, what did it mean to you to receive that award? And I just wonder, just in your mind going, hey, I've come to a place to play NCAA basketball, and I've made an impact on this program. How do you feel about that? And what is the significance of being acknowledged in that way?
Yeah, I definitely, appreciate whatever awards I receive. And I think that a lot of the testament of improving is because of my teammates and coaches around me. I think that the coaching staff and my teammates really push each other and me to be the best player and get the best out of each person. I think that I really tried to buy into that. And there's just a million people every year who are equally as improved. And I just ended up luckily being the one who got the award. But I think it's definitely a testament to the culture at Dartmouth of just working hard and letting that hard work kind of take you where you need to go.
Well, you're certainly putting in the work, and your game is is blossoming here in this 5th year. Let me pick your brain, future neuroscientist and neurosurgeon. Just help me out with this. Like it's come to me maybe over the last year or so. And I know this is total layman's terms, AARYN, but it's just something I'm interested in, and learning about the brain, that it is a living, breathing, ever growing part of our body. Like I never really understood that your brain chemistry can change over the years. And do I have that right? And is that something that interests and fascinates you?
Yeah, just super simply, it's basically like the attention you put and like the mental processes you kind of ingrain in yourself become stronger, and the ones that you don't become weaker. It's just like shooting the basketball every day. The more I shoot the basketball, the more that muscle pattern is ingrained and in your muscle and brain as well. And then if we stop shooting, come back a little rusty. So same thing, you kind of use it, lose it type thing. So if you don't really practice like shooting a basketball, those connections kind of get a little rusty, and then the more you do practice, the more you strengthen them. So that's kind of the way, like you call it plasticity. That's kind of the way the brain adapts and ever changes, just kind of strengthening the connections you do use every day and then weakening the ones you don't.
Yeah, I can't get enough of that. I don't know if I would ever be able to study it and become an expert like yourself, but it really does intrigue me. And then the stresses and experiences, and then unfortunately, if you choose, drugs and alcohol and other foreign chemicals can actually have an impact on how your brain functions as well. Is that right?
Yeah, but I'm nowhere near expert, so please do not quote me on any of that.
More so than us, though. AARYN, don't sell yourself short. Let's pivot to something that is on the court, as you have become such a versatile and relied upon scorer and producer for your team. Can you talk to us about or share some of the more memorable moments of being a player for the Dartmouth Big Green? Any moment that sticks out to you basketball-wise that you're like, this is why I came here. This is everything that I wanted it to be. Is there any game or moment or practice that sticks out for you in that regard?
It's hard to really like kind of narrow it down to one moment, but yeah, mostly I say this quite often, but it's not really the specific moment of practice or game that sticks out to me. It's kind of the whole experience, and really like my favorite and most memorable part of the years I've been here is just the time I've spent with my teammates, coaches, really connecting with them, and whether that be definitely on the court through games and practices, but also off the court. I think that's probably like the one thing that I've really valued the most, because obviously, as you guys know, like some of the connections you build on the court are lifelong, and I really have enjoyed those great connections with my teammates and coaches. And
I don't know much about the Dartmouth campus and Hanover in general, because AARYN, when I was playing and coaching, we just kind of go to the gym, we go to the hotel, we go back to the gym for the game, and then we're on a bus ride out of town. You know what I mean? So yeah. If I were to visit Hanover, the campus, Dartmouth, what could I expect? What could our listeners expect? What could I look forward to in terms of experiencing? Give us a little bit of color that you experience on the day-to-day at Dartmouth.
Sure. Yeah. It obviously depends when you're visiting. I don't spend many hours of the day outside now just because of the super cold temperatures, but the campus is super beautiful. And I think that's one of like the main attractions of coming to Dartmouth, kind of this sequestered campus in the middle of the woods. And I think walking around, especially during the warmer months in fall and spring, you really see a super strong sense of community and just being so far removed from a lot of other major cities. A lot of students really, embrace and dive into the Dartmouth community. And I think that's one of the most special things about the place is how connected everybody is to each other. And walking through, especially in the spring, you'll see like a lot of people on the quad, the green, playing spike ball or volleyball. And there's always some sort of activity that you can do and enjoy with a bunch of others that are just as in love with the campus as you are. And I think that if you do take the time to come up here in the summer months, I know it's a little out your way, you really love love campus and really fall in love with the sense of community. And even in the winter too, it's just a little colder. So
sure. And AARYN, just hearing you talk, has Dartmouth become a second home for you?
Yeah, for sure. I think the college has a lot to offer, and I think that I've really tried to make it a point to explore all those avenues and enjoy the people that I've met, and definitely made some lifelong connections here. So I would consider it a second home.
That's outstanding. And that's all that we hope for when we are fortunate enough to have a college experience, or maybe some of our listeners, if they're sending their kids off to college, they certainly want to have the experience that it sounds like you're having. This has been awesome to have you on the show, AARYN. And I'll just say that, on behalf of myself and Lawrence, one of the best parts of this show is, listen, we love Ivy League basketball, but there's so many stories to tell about the student athletes and the coaches, and having you guys on to share those stories, first person perspective, has been a joy for us. So I greatly appreciate you carving out time. Before we let you go, we always ask our guests if there's something that they would love to see happen, whether it's on their campus, within their athletic department, maybe as you look at the Ivy League campuses as a whole, academically, athletically, but something that may improve the Ivy League or Dartmouth, anything that comes to mind that you would like to see happen in the near future?
I could just think of maybe one thing across the league in terms of like the scheduling stuff. I know it was definitely unique this year, and it was grateful to have the extra weeks to play the canceled games. But I know something me and my teammates have spoken about was like maybe going back to some of the back-to-backs, because sometimes some of the travel is a little extra in terms of, let's say we had to play Penn one weekend, and then instead of driving 45 minutes across to play Princeton, we'd drive the 7 hours back, and then in another couple weeks do that same length of the trip to play Princeton. So the travel time definitely is a little extraneous with this new schedule, but I can appreciate how it's played out and benefited us this year with all the cancellations. But I think that may be one thing that could be looked at again, and the ADs could communicate with each other and figure out the best schedule for the players moving forward. But just personally, that was something that I could see a little being fixed and hopefully tweaked moving forward.
AARYN, you win the jackpot. You found the two guys, the two old Muppets in the balcony, who have been calling for the schedule to go back to the back-to-backs. We're right there with you.
I'm also not an AD, so I can't appreciate all the other struggles there are with back-to-backs just as a player point of view, being on the bus for 7 hours and then 7 hours and then another 7. So
we strongly agree with you, but AARYN, don't sell yourself short. And the best athletic directors and university presidents and professors, for that matter, they bring their expertise, but they know they're there to serve the students. There's nothing that's going to function well and productively and for the better without listening to the students. And so, encourage you to, stay strong with your voice. And you certainly have us championing the same thing. I would say you should know that Cale Ketchings, who's a senior captain for the Harvard Crimson, he mentioned the same thing, that from a standpoint of the Friday, Saturdays, better allowed him to kind of frame his week and know when he could be in academic mode, and then know when he had the athletics. And that was usually, the Friday, Saturdays. Is that somewhat how you feel in terms of just being able to commit a little bit more of a schedule for yourself academically?
Yeah, I think kind of, as he said, kind of getting that rhythm of knowing that like every weekend, all right, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we're going to be in like travel or preparation mode for the games, and kind of having that Sunday, Monday time to yourself to really like buckle down academically. And then that whole rhythm that you get in is a lot more comfortable. And sometimes you have a game Saturday or Sunday, Monday, or like Saturday, Monday, and then a Tuesday game, and it just kind of disrupts that whole rhythm. And then obviously the preparation going to each one of those like situations is different, because sometimes we do a Wednesday, Thursday scout, then you have a day break, then you have practice again, and then end up like the off days kind of screwed up. So yeah, just the rhythm would definitely be better if it was Friday, Saturday.
Well said. I think your balanced approach to that is also rung through with this interview. We just can kind of see where your versatility, your calm, cool, and collectiveness on the court carries over to how you are in everyday life, Aaron. It's been great to kind of visit with you and learn more about you. I know our listeners will really enjoy this interview, and we've enjoyed having you on. So thanks for joining us on the Ivy League Hoops Hour. We wish you the best for the season. I know you guys are in a chase to get to one of those top 4 spots and get yourselves into the Ivy Madness. So our best to you, Coach McLaughlin, and the rest of the team for the rest of the season, Aaron. Thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you guys very much. I appreciate the time, and it was a blast talking to you guys. Take care and stay safe.
And now we come to the segment of our podcast where we answer listener emails. This week's email comes from Alexander Gayer, who writes, "Hey guys, I was captain of the Dartmouth team in 1993 and remain an avid follower of Ivy League hoops. After tuning in for the first show with Coach McLaughlin, I've been coming back every week and just finished last week's episode with Coach James Jones. My question relates to what I perceive to be an annual disrespecting of the Ivy League in the NCAA tournament seeding process. I was reminded of this as you spoke to Coach Jones about the difficulty in the Ivy becoming a 2-bid league. This year, Lunardi's first bracketology edition had the Ivy as a 16 seed. It seems like we're always swimming upstream, notwithstanding the level of success the Ivy League has had on an annual basis in its non-conference schedule. The latest iteration of Lunardi's bracket has Princeton as a 14 seed, which is getting closer to where I think we should be, but not quite there yet. Welcome to your thoughts. Thanks for a great show."
Alexander Gayer, another good question from one of our dedicated listeners. Please, we invite all of you to write in and keep this show as fresh and as engaging as it possibly can. We can't do it without you. So write to us at ivyleaguehoopshour@gmail.com and pose your questions, outstanding ones like Alexander has offered up to us. So I'll take a stab at it and I'll say this. Yes, in general, but you're probably not going to like my answer as we sit in 2022. As we look at the Ivy League, and I'm going to say this respectfully, I actually don't think it's as strong as it's been in years past. The parity is there, without a doubt. And that's what's going to make it an awesome conference schedule this year. And Ivy Madness is going to be outstanding. We still don't have any idea who's going to grab that 4 seed, that 3 seed, looking like Yale and Princeton, 1 or 2 interchangeable. But so it's going to be a fun ride. But in terms of non-conference, Lawrence and I took a stab at this about the midway point in our special edition of the show when we talked about the best non-conference wins of the season. And those weigh in certainly in terms of how you're going to be seated in the NCAA tournament, as Alexander mentioned, especially because the rest of the league, or top to bottom, the league isn't always as strong. And some teams might sit in rankings of, say, anywhere from the 250s to maybe even 330 or so. And so you're not picking up a lot of points and respect from the committee in terms of your conference wins. So win the games you need to in the league, and then obviously non-conference schedule. So let's look at Princeton, who I still think has the edge in terms of winning the league. Their best wins out of conference, South Carolina. There are 68 teams that make the NCAA tournament. So South Carolina is far off the mark. In fact, South Carolina might not even be an NIT team. Oregon State, a nice win for Princeton, true road game. Oregon State is sitting at 226 in terms of the net rankings. So you're looking at 2 teams that, frankly, those aren't impressive wins in terms of what the NCAA looks at. Lawrence and I mentioned that Dartmouth might have had one of the more impressive wins for the league in beating Georgetown. Well, Georgetown is winless in the Big East right now, unfortunately. I'm offering all those stats up just to say that, like, this year, the league really doesn't have very impressive wins outside of conference play. The conference as a whole is probably not as strong and robust as it, may have been in years past. Penn played an awesome schedule, a very challenging one, and lost most of those games. We've talked about they were 3-10, I think, going into conference play. If they had won in some of those games, that would have not only beefed up their own resume, but it would have beefed up anybody's resume in the league who was fortunate enough to beat Penn, like Princeton. But Princeton's win against Penn really doesn't have a strong value to it in terms of NCAA seeding. So I'm throwing all that out at you, Alexander, because this year, and if I'm picking Princeton still, a loss to Yale, I'm looking at Princeton as a 15 seed at best right now. And I think there's some more challenges coming Princeton's way. If Yale or Princeton win the league, 15 seed probably sits about right. In years past, when Cornell, a Penn, a Princeton, even a Harvard and a Yale, when they ventured outside the league and won games against high major programs, quality mid-major programs that were good, then I think it warranted a higher seeding. Frankly, there have been some named schools that the Ivy League, the Ancient Eight, has been able to knock off in the non-conference play, but they've really not been very good teams. And so at the end of the day, it's hard to fool the numbers. And I would say that a 15 seed at best is probably about right in 2022.
It's time for predictions.
Predictions, Pat.
It looks like I'm still in the lead at 14-8. Coach, 10-12. So I'll make my predictions first. For Friday, February 4th, I'm going to go with Yale over Dartmouth, Penn over Columbia, Cornell over Princeton, and Brown at home over Harvard. Moving to Saturday, February 5th, I've got Brown at home over Dartmouth, Cornell at home over Penn, Princeton on the road over Columbia, and Yale at home over Harvard. And lastly, on Wednesday, February 9th, I've got Cornell at home over Columbia. How about you, Coach?
Predictions, Pat.
Well, that's a much delayed game. As we know, the impending snowstorm canceled that one. I'll get to that one, but let me try to go in the order somewhat close to the order that you took. So let's look at Dartmouth against Yale. Yeah, Dartmouth loses to Yale. The defending champs remain undefeated at home for at least another game. Penn beats Columbia. I was surprised that Columbia couldn't hold home court advantage versus Dartmouth. I was. And I'm also surprised how the scheduling has been pretty advantageous for Penn. 4 of their first 5 Ivy League games at home, and then 2 of their first 3 road games in league play come against non-traditional powers, Columbia and Cornell. I think Penn takes full advantage. They get a road win, another one in league play versus Columbia. If you like offense, like I know you do, just like Lawrence and myself, this is the game to watch. Princeton and Cornell, I'm referring to. They rank in the top 3 statistically in points per game, field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, made threes, assists, and assist to turnover ratio in the Ivy League. So in an offensive matchup, I'm going to look at their defensive efficiencies to influence my prediction, Lawrence. And they're both dead even at yielding 1.035 points per game, which isn't very good. It's actually in the lower half of Division I basketball. In an even matchup then, okay, against 2 really strong offensive teams and below average defensive teams, I'm going to pick the home team. But then again, Cornell's home crowd isn't boisterous. Princeton wins on the road, Lawrence, to continue themselves as the best team in the league. Harvard loses to Brown. This year's Brown is better than this year's Harvard team, especially considering Harvard's injuries. And on every day of the week, I'd pick Brown to win. But maybe that's why I should be picking Brown to lose, because they've been struggling, folks. I'm going to stay on that bandwagon, though. Harvard loses to Brown. Now, Lawrence, I'm going to pivot to Saturday's games. I'm going to say that Brown is able to beat Dartmouth. And if they don't go 2-0 at home in must-win games, then my conscience and simply the math tells me to let it go, and Brown isn't making Ivy madness this season. So I'm looking at you, Brown Bears, rooting for you to get it done and to help me out with my predictions, or else I'll keep falling behind Lawrence. Cornell is going to beat Penn. I'm not super confident in my Princeton pick over Cornell, but I'm going to stick with it for the record. But it also says on the other side, Cornell might get an actual home sweep against the Killer Peas. I'm definitely banking on Cornell to beat Penn. I think Brian Earl will come up with something to focus completely on slowing down Jordan Dingle. I think that'll put too much pressure on the rest of the Quakers, and Cornell will squeak through with a W. Princeton over Columbia in a big way, plus 15. The Tigers just have too many weapons, and they need to stay clear-minded in terms of the games they absolutely need to win. And Harvard's going to lose to Yale. Yale knows who they are in terms of their team identity. They found a gem in Matt Noling's development in terms of playing inside out with him during conference play. And Harvard, as I mentioned, is reeling. The only chance they might have is Chris Ludlam getting healthy. He's been out. Noah Kirkwood has been an outstanding player for Tommy Amaker. Third in the league in scoring, field goal percentage, assists, and minutes played. He actually leads the league in steals, and he's sixth in rebounding. But his team may not qualify for Ivy Madness, and so it is Yale over Harvard. Looking at that delayed Columbia-Cornell game, Columbia is just not in a good way, folks. They actually have some nice players. They're trying to play cohesive basketball under Jim Engels. No fault there, but just not enough weapons to contend with folks in the Ivy League. I think they're going to struggle as they hit the road. Cornell has been undefeated on their home court. So far, so good. After dealing with the Killer Peas, I also think they're going to be able to deal with Columbia. Cornell Big Red, they knock off the Columbia Lions. And there are my picks. Lawrence is in the lead and looking good. I'm chasing him as best I can. And I know you all have some thoughts on these games, teams, trends. So let us know what you think. Write into us at ivyleaguehoopshour@gmail.com. Share your thoughts, opinions, feedback on my predictions, Lawrence's predictions, anything that we cover on the show. We love to hear from you and promise to work your thoughts into the show.
It's time for our non-Ivy League nods. Coach, who've you got?
I'm going to jump off with Jeff Linder this week. Who is he, Lawrence? He's the head coach of the Wyoming Cowboys, who sit at 17-3 and rank in the top 25 nationally in three-point percentage defense at 28%. That's all they yield game to game, and fewest turnovers per game nationally at 10.6. The Cowboys' feisty defense and excellent ball security on offense have allowed them to compete favorably in the Mountain West Conference with the likes of Air Force, friends of the show, and mid-major powers San Diego State, Boise State, UNLV, and number 22 ranked Colorado State. Speaking of Colorado State, Linder's team just knocked off the Rams to remain a perfect 9-0 at home this season and plant themselves firmly at the number 2 spot in the league, right behind Boise State. Won't be long before Linder is at a press conference for a new job. That's my opinion. Until then, here's a non-Ivy League nod to the job Jeff Linder has done with the Cowboys this season.
And now let's spread some love around the Ivy League. Coach, what are you hearing out there?
Spreading the love. That's what I'm hearing. Me trying to sing off key at one of my favorite segments of the show. But I'm going to start off with Princeton women's lacrosse. They placed at 15 in the country in the Intercollegiate Women's Lacrosse Coaches Association 2022 preseason poll. Lawrence, the Tigers are one of only 2 Ivy League teams to be ranked in the top 25, number 17th ranked Penn being the other. In addition to playing Penn, the Tigers will face off against 7 other top 25 teams throughout the year. What a grueling schedule. But they'll undoubtedly be in the mix for an NCAA berth come tournament time due to that schedule. Tigers Hall of Fame head coach Chris Saylor, she announced that she would be stepping down at the conclusion of this season. Wonderful lady Chris Saylor is. We wish her all the best in her pursuit of her 16th and final Ivy League championship with this year's Princeton women's lacrosse team. Now, Lawrence, you're spreading some love too. Who do you got?
I want to spread some love to the family of Jerry Sherwin, a member of Columbia's class of 1955 who died this past week. Over the past 65 years, Jerry was a fixture on the Columbia bench and a mentor to generations of Columbia students. Jerry was one of the familiar faces around the Ivy League that I always enjoyed seeing during my time at Princeton. And you would never know it from talking to Jerry how important he was, but you would hear it from everyone else. He's the namesake of the Gerald Sherwin Young Alumni Service Award, and I hope that our listeners will join us in remembering one of the foundational figures in the Ivy League.
And that just about does it for the Ivy League Hoops Hour. Outstanding contributions from Jon Solomon in Our Eyes Don't Lie to Me. We'd expect nothing less. And wonderful interviews with William McCormack from the Yale Daily News. And as always, the highlight of our show, a student athlete from the Ivy League, AARYN RAI, the super versatile on and off the floor forward and student athlete for the Dartmouth Big Green as they chase that number 4 spot, maybe number 3. I'm not sure if they can catch Yale or Princeton for the Ivy Madness. We'll see how it all plays out, and you'll have Lawrence and myself to rely on as we watch the games, pour over the numbers and analytics, and chop it up for you. Please join this conversation. Write to us at ivyleaguehoopshour@gmail.com and let us know what you think of our predictions, information that William shared with us on Yale and whether they are truly the top team in the league. Is Tosan Awoma holding on to that Player of the Year award, or is Azar Swain making himself known? Any and all of these things, please let us know where you sit and how you feel on these topics. Also, catch us on our YouTube channel, the Ivy League Hoops Hour, if you want to listen to us there. And also keep an eye on our Twitter presence, as I'm always hashtagging some film and teasers into our episodes. But always, we need to have you joining us each and every week. So spread the word with family and friends. Make sure you carve out time to listen to us. Follow, give us a 5-star rating, all of the above. You know the drill now, folks. And it's been awesome for myself and Lawrence. Can't wait to connect with you all around this same time next week. John Thompson Jr. I remember many times him talking to us as a staff after practice, as he watched practice and get up and down and would help us coach better, namely the assistant coaches. And we just kind of sit there and listen. And there's so much that was coming his way. And one of the things he said is, you know what? When you lose, you need to shut the beep up. And when you win, you just get to do all the talking you want. And that's just what it is.
How have you been holding out? That's fantastic. That needs to be its own clip.
Well, that's Coach. I mean, that's why I think so much of him. And whether it's a Kirill, it's a Thompson, it's a Bobby Knight. Say what you will, but some of these great coaches, different from me, they can just get right down to the matter, and just illuminate it instantly. I might take a few more words to get there, if I can get there. But that's his nugget, and I think it applies to what we're talking about, and then some.
I get it. I totally get it. Because I'm the guy who was arguing, well, come on, like sportsmanship for the 92-4, and at the same time, like when it's just us, and it's like pride on the line, I'm gloating. No qualms about it. I'm gloating hard. You have to come hard when you win. I mean, hard like Al Pacino and Carlito's Way, telling off the judge.
I would like to thank the Court of Appeals for reversing you, Your Honor, and I want to thank Almighty God, without whom no case gets tossed.
Right.
Hard like Daniel Day-Lewis when he was the oil man. Chug the whiskey, get up in the guy's face. I told you what I was going to do.
You look like a fool, don't you, Dilford? Yes. Yes.